On today's show, Donovan Mitchell in 2024. What's the deal, man? Let's talk about him.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. I'm Chris Manning. That is Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens, as always, for his work on production. Today's show is all about Donovan Mitchell. We're going to start by talking about the Mitchell-specific fallout of the Knicks-Raptors trade. We're going to touch in segment 2 about what Mitchell is right now exactly in the prime of his career, where he is among the league's hierarchy, how you build with him as your best guy. In segment 3, what the future with him looks like. That is going to be endless speculation until something happens one way or the other. We'll talk about it. We'll make some predictions what the Cavs will or will do. We'll get to that in segment 3. But to start, Evan, let me ask you this first. When you see the Knicks go make this OG Anunoby trade, and trade quickly, and trade Barrett, and only trade one pick, and ultimately give up just 2 players and the 1 pick, so they still have a cache of picks, and you just look at what they did, where do you think this leads them as like being a team that can actually make Cleveland, if it comes to that, and I don't want to get too hard, but like, did that change your view at all about like where they could be as far as a team goes that could make a real offer for Mitchell at some point in the future?
I mean, realistically speaking, I think the Knicks are always going to be the in-house favorite to acquire Donovan Mitchell. If Mitchell makes it clear to the Cavs that, like, hey, I don't intend on sticking around long term. You can ride this out, and maybe they can try and keep convincing him. But the Cavs believe internally they may have the leg up on everybody else still. And sure, like, Donovan's never going to like say it publicly, like, yo, I want out of here or anything like that. But the expectation coming out of Utah last year was that he expected to end up with the Knicks, and I do wonder if in his heart of hearts he still expects to end up there. And if that does become like completely true, yeah, you have to wonder how they navigate it. And I think the Knicks are the favorite no matter what. But I know Mark Stein reported this, that like the Knicks have kind of cooled on the prospects of getting Mitchell, and then Adrian Wojnarowski goes on NBA Today or whatever it's called on ESPN and says like the Knicks are looking to kind of avoid entering that second luxury tax apron, and certainly acquiring Mitchell could put them in that range and make things really muddy for them, and then probably have to like maybe shift a lot of bodies around, and maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But I think until, because like you said, you and I were talking about this before the show started, rather, the conversations that are being shared publicly could not line up with what's being shared internally, because some teams, everything's fluid, nothing's really static, everything shifts on a day-to-day basis. But like, yeah, for now, I would say the Knicks are, no matter what, like, interest or not, like, Mitchell could just make it abundantly clear, like, hey, this is where I want to go. And if the Cavs want to oblige him and do right by him, I think they could. And I wonder what Cleveland could kind of get back, considering, like, I think it's not a hot take to say Donovan Mitchell's better than OG Anunoby, but like, Anunoby does provide like a premium commodity in basketball, and the Knicks didn't feel like they gave up a lot. I know, like, it depends on how you feel about RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly, but only 1 draft pick, as you said, just to get OG Anunoby. And of course, Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa too, but like, Anunoby is the main central focus of this trade for New York. So I wonder, like, do the Cavs get more? Is it something comparable? Is it slightly more than that? Like, I do wonder what the package is, just because, like, Mitchell does put together strong regular seasons, but he's had 2 playoff outings in a row where he completely flames out. And I wonder if that makes teams cool on him. And a lot of teams probably aren't high on a shorter guard who relies on his athleticism entering his 30s. Like, that's going to tap out eventually. But yeah, I wonder what the market holds. But he will be an attractive trade asset come this summer if the Cavs can't come to terms on an agreement, when Mitchell made it clear like that's the earliest he'll entertain a contract extension with the Cavs.
Okay, so a lot there.
Yeah, I know. I think thanks on it.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of different strands to kind of pull out. I think here's the exact wording on the Stein report. Initial indications are that the Knicks do not intend to mount an all-out pursuit of Donovan Mitchell. the Cleveland Cavaliers, for that matter, signaled to rival teams throughout December that they aren't prepared to entertain Mitchell overtures. And we'll come back to that last point later because a lot of other people have reported that same thing. Where I come down on this is split, because you could, to me, look at what the Knicks now have, if it comes to that, and say, okay, you traded Emmanuel quickly, who I really like, and yes, you have to pay him, but that's a guy that you could fit with and build with. RJ is salary filler I would prefer versus the other options. They still have Quentin Grimes. They have a ton of picks. Julius Randle might have to be the salary. That's not something that, if I'm Cleveland, that entertains me. That you have to find a third place for him, probably, and maybe a pick's going there to satiate a team in that regard. I think it is both possible that they aren't going to pursue something all out right now, but I think, like, in the short term, this makes it like harder than it already was to see something happen with Mitchell like that in the next month. What I do wonder, and I still feel like the roster is set up that way for them to make some kind of star trade, and that could be Mitchell. You could pick other names, who someone else come available, but I still feel like that is a possibility for them. And if they're saying there's no all-out pursuit right now, that doesn't mean there's, like, all-out pursuit means something to me different than, like, there's no pursuit. That's
Mm-hmm.
If you want to parse the wording, all out means something very different than just, like, there being a simple pursuit.
Yeah, and like an all-out pursuit is the Knicks are trying to trade for Donovan Mitchell tomorrow. I think an all-out pursuit during the regular season, like the last time the Knicks did one was when they went to go get Carmelo. Like that was an all-out pursuit.
They didn't do it for Donovan Mitchell a year ago.
Correct. And I think, like you had noted, I think it's the due diligence of any team. I would imagine other rival organizations are keeping their finger on the pulse of the Mitchell situation. Ditto for the Cavs. They're keeping their fingers on the pulse just to see, like, hey, is he happy here? Like, he has stressed several times, like, I will stick where I think I have the best chance to win more than anything. Like, I think he is going to consider the off-court stuff, too, that comes with it. But, like, is Cleveland the best location for him to win? Because he can hop into PJ anytime he wants to go watch the Mets play. He has done that plenty of times, even with the Cavs, like, during preseason when the Mets were on their playoff run. But it's a little tricky, I guess. And like you said, like, I don't think the teams are going to be rushing to trade Mitchell at the deadline. Neither is Cleveland. Like, unless, like, this relationship suddenly becomes untenable between now and February 8th, like, the Cavs are more than comfortable with, like, letting this ride until the offseason. And, like, I feel like people saying that the Cavs are rushing to move him now or teams are looking to acquire him now, like, no, they're going to kind of play the long game and see where this goes, just because, like, hey, what if he does entertain a contract extension and then ultimately end up signing something with Cleveland this summer? Like, this conversation's over. Or I think the market just really starts to open up if the Cavs, like, make him a legitimate contract extension offer and he politely declines it, whether it's financials or, like, he's waiting to see what's best for him. I think that's when you ultimately see, like, the trade speculation for him really start to heat up.
We will see. I think this is not done. And I think I understand if people feel a certain way about it. This is just we'll get to this again in segment 3 in real detail. But until Donovan Mitchell signs or does not sign an extension, this is just kind of the gray area they live in. And that's unfortunate, but it's just, I think, part of the reality they are in with him right now. And it's for Cleveland, I think if you're looking at that Knicks trade, you're absolutely thinking about that in some way. All right, coming up next, what is Mitchell right now? Let's talk about him, what he is, where he stands, all of that, and more up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. The NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, when they place a $5 moneyline bet. That is, again, $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in their new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, and much, much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and official sportsbook of Locked On. They'll have Cavs Wizards, both games, Cavs Bucks, all of those odds and more up on FanDuel. All right, we are back here on Locked On Cavs. Let's talk about what Mitchell is as a star player. If he's your best guy, what does that mean, and how good is he really? So I've been asking you kind of an open-ended question. With where Cleveland is at right now, he's definitely the team's best player. What to you is the ceiling on a team? What is the height a team can reach if Donovan Mitchell is the best player in your basketball team? He's a top 10 to 20 guy, somewhere in that range, I think, is where I'd
say he's more top 15 to 20 right now, just kind of given the emergence of some younger players, and we can get into this.
Being generous up to I'm being a little kind up to the top 10, perhaps. But what is he as your best guy to you?
I think he is a high-level scorer that can get you buckets from anywhere, whether it's at the free throw line, the three-point arc, or on the interior or in the mid-range, where he really thrives at times, especially for Cleveland. As I had noted, he is a smaller guard that is hyper-athletic and just has that motor that runs hot. And I think I was discrediting him a little bit because he does rely on his athleticism for some insane plays. And I think that will fade over time just because that just tends to happen when smaller guards hit 30. They start to kind of find a bit of a cliff. But because he is such a good shooting threat like that can age well, and that can carry him through the embers of his prime and into like the twilight of his career. But right now, just because, like, sure, he does try harder on defense for JV Bickerstaff, there are still moments he still hasn't been great this season, or even last season when he wasn't perfect. It's hard because he doesn't have like the passing vision of a Darius Garland or just any like elite point guard or just like playmakers. Like, yeah, you could play him at point, but like it's only going to get you so far. And he is very heliocentric to the offense as well, where like the offense is very reliant on him hitting those shots. Or at least, you have to sacrifice a lot of opportunities for him to find a groove and rhythm. And are you comfortable doing that, like with a championship level team or just even a playoff caliber team, which I think he instantly makes any team he joins, as long as there's existing talent around him, of course. But like right now, like just looking at like where the Cavs are at, like because of injuries, they are fighting to avoid the play-in, but they could ultimately end up there. I think if they're fully healthy, they have a chance to get through it, and maybe they go down swinging in the first round. But like right now, like their floor to me is a second round exit, and their ceiling is still like a conference final contender, where Mitchell isn't in the very best players the league offers, but he's in the hall of very great, which is obviously a step above very good, but he does have some downsides to his game that you really have to adjust, and adapt for, whether it's on offense or defense. And I think that can give some teams pause, considering like if you do think you're more of a complete product and you're maybe a star away, if he becomes your best player, like can he adapt things, or can your coaching staff and the existing team adapt things to make him fit? Because you probably are going to end up paying a bit of a premium commodity to acquire him if the Cavs ultimately like trade him or something.
This isn't, I guess, like the exact conversation, but just as a follow-up, so you think their floor right now, based on what you've seen so far, is still second, like their baseline is second. You said second round of the playoffs. That's their floor.
I think that's their floor. If they avoid the play,
like the worst they could do, it would be the
worst
floor.
They could do is they make it to the second round of the playoffs and they draw Boston or Milwaukee or even Philadelphia or any of the other teams that maybe upset one of the aforementioned teams. Like I could see Cleveland getting past some of the lower teams in the East that maybe sneak in. Like I think a best of 7 against Indiana would be a throw up in the air, but like Orlando, that would be a slugfest, but I think the Cavs could get through it because the Magic have no playoff experience. I think the Heat, they're just such a weird team. Like maybe that's a team that beats Cleveland in the first round, or the Cavs just handle and take care of business against Miami. But yeah, I could see them, at least just given what they've done in the offseason, like they have more depth and talent available. And so instead of having like 5.5 players that are viable, the Cavs can trot out 7 to 8 viable players with some choice situation dudes that could kind of swing some momentum at moments for them in the playoffs. Well, how do you feel about it?
I don't think their floor is second round. I don't think there's anything, and I understand injuries, but like if their baseline, like they didn't even make the second round last year, and they were a much better team last year. So I don't understand how that's their floor. I guess is where I'm.
I think confused. I look at them like statistically speaking, yes, they were a better team last year, but I think in terms of pure talent, and like you said, injuries do happen, but like the Cavs didn't have Max Strus on the roster last year. Like I know George Niang has his warts, but like he does provide shooting. I think Sam Merrill realistically never plays for this team in the playoffs. So this team's fully healthy, but like he is showcased some stability where like you can give him some run, especially if he's able to provide you some shooting. Like the Cavs do and are finding options to modernize this team a little bit. And the problem is it depends on who you draw in the first round. Like if it's the Knicks and let's say OG Anunoby slows down Donovan Mitchell, or the Knicks scheme up their game plan to slow down Mitchell entirely, and they force the Cavs to lean on like Mobley and Garland to create everything like New York kind of did last year, that's more of a first round exit. But I guess I look at this team and like they did address a lot of the clear needs they had in terms of shooting. And it's still not a perfect finished product by any means, and it's hard to evaluate because they're not healthy. But I think at least, given the talent and growth of some of the players internally and just the guys they brought in, like I think second round floor is a little more fair, even if they didn't even make the second or put up much of, if any, of a fight against New York in the first round last year.
I don't know how you get there. This team is 18 and 15 on their 8th. If the season ended today, and it doesn't, they'd be playing in the 7-8 in the play-in against the Knicks. They would then, if they, let's say they win that, they're playing the Bucks in round 1.
Yeah, that's a different story. And like I said, like if
so
they were in the play-in today, if they avoid the play-in,
4 or 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5. They're gonna up in 4 or 5 if they're fully healthy and things like turn around right at the right time. And that's ideally like Evan Mobley is back and doesn't have any issues with his knee, and Darius Garland isn't as fragile as he has been in the past and is able to play the rest of the year. Like, yeah, 4 or 5 is like their ceiling in terms of just like Eastern Conference standings, which is a disappointing in of itself because you're hoping they'd make that leap to be in like the top 3 or maybe 4, depending on how things like panned out for Philly, and it's panning out pretty great for Philly, so top 4 now. But like they're in that 4 or 5 talk, and they will have a tough outing, but I think they have the capability to win it if they're either the 4 seed or like the 5 seed, depending on who they face. Like if that's New York, Orlando, Indiana, Miami, or any of those other teams are kind of muddled with right now, not at the summit of the East.
Yeah, we're in different pages here. Here's just what I'll say about Mitchell as your best guy. I think you do need to get another creator. They have that in Garland. It's maybe defensively create some problems. You need a lot of shooting. I think they've gone. The one thing I do agree with you on here is as far as the way they've gone about shooting, they've added shooting to fit him. I think with him as your best guy, there's just very specific things I think you need to. And I think ultimately, if I'm building out like the best version of Mitchell, I don't necessarily know if he's I think if you're in a true title contender, a true team to compete at the top of the East, I don't know if he's the best guy on your team. I think he can be like a 1A. I think he could be like, if you put him in a situation where like the best, and this is some of the promise of Mobley, and I think it just hasn't happened, obviously. There's a world where like he's a really good, like it's similar to like the Dame Giannis dynamic where like Dame is often closing those games offensively. He's doing all the creating. He's doing all the scoring. He has the ball in his hands a lot, but Giannis is the overall best guy, and he's the defensive tone setter. If you get that kind of star level with Mitchell, which is obviously very hard to do, you could do some stuff there. But like that, right? But that's kind of my point. Is I think like Mitchell as your best guy, I think there are some baked limitations, and I think if you can either build the infrastructure around him or he's with that kind of guy, that's kind of the best case for him, where either he's like a number 2 in that situation or everything else around him is just kind of keyed into him to make up for the things he's not great at. And like, he's not a great defender. I think he was better last year than he's been. This year's been fine. I think creative wise, he's not up to the par of like a Devin Booker or some of the other shooting guards in the league. I think he's really good. He's a top 15 to 20, 10 to 20 guy. He's having another really good offensive year, but I think he's not in that upper echelon as good as he is. And I think you see some of the limitations of like, if that's your lead guy, I think some of the limitations you see with Cleveland are just when Mitchell is your lead guy. I think there are just some limitations there. That is, again, not to say that he's not very good. It's just the league is so competitive at the top and the margins are so thin that sometimes like you can have really good players in situations that don't totally work. He's not the only player on a team right now that he's this good and his team's not that good. It's just really hard to win NBA games in 2023. It just is. I mean, you look at Atlanta and like Trae Young's like, say that's an all-star guy. That team's not particularly good. You look at the Warriors right now, they're 15 and 17. The Lakers are 510th in the West. They have the best player, in my opinion, of all time. The Suns have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, who I know haven't played a lot, but like they're 18 and 15. Like this is having great players does not 100% translate to the most amount of wins. There's a lot that goes into it. And I think with Mitchell, there's certain characteristics you have to build into it. I think maybe we should do another episode at some point about like where this season is going, because you got my brain rolling about like their floor being in the second round. Because I am not there, and I am somewhat of a pessimist. I would say I'm pragmatic, but there's just nothing I've seen. There's just nothing. I just haven't. You got to like, you are what your record says you are to some degree, and like, and your numbers, and it's just like, I respect your optimism, my friend. I didn't know you had that in you. All right, coming up next, Mitchell in the future. Yeah, I really didn't know. That's wild to me. It blew my mind. All right, coming up next, what the future with him looks like. We'll talk about some of the reporting, what that means, all of that up next. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. It is the easiest way to play DFS. They have everything you could want as far as sports goes, and you're just picking more or less than on 2 to 6 projections, you versus the numbers, no sharks, none of that over at PrizePicks. And if you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like the rapper Meek Mill and the comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community. They also now offer Apple Pay, so if you want to reload your account, get your balance, your deposit match up with us today, you can now do that via Apple Pay. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, so here's just the first, the big bit of reporting we have on Mitchell and the trade market as of right now. Zach Lowe, Mark Stein, Jake Fisher, and I believe Shams, I might be wrong about that last one, but at least those first three have all reported in one way or the other, in different wording, in different contexts, that the Cavs have not taken Mitchell overture to this point, that they are not going to look to trade him this month. And I mean, here's what I will say, I think, about that on its face. The message that trading Donovan Mitchell, right, let's just say February 1st, they're similar record now. They're getting an energy, and his camp's like, we don't really want to sign an extension, and they decide that to trade him. I understand, like, pragmatically where that could come to that in the summer or whatever. I get that. That's a reality you could be staring down. But to do it in season, the message that would send to the team, I think the message that sent to your fan base, I don't think that's like from a purely PR perspective, and you can't make decisions fully in that way. But boy, that would be a really, really uncomfortable reality, I think, to put yourself in as far as having to sell that kind of trade in season. And like for that reason alone, don't trade him before the deadline. If you have to trade him in the future, fine. Don't do it in the next month.
Yeah, I just don't see a world where the Cavs trade him tomorrow or the day after this episode drops, or the day this episode drops. So tomorrow after we record this, or even at the trade deadline, because one, the optics are just muddled, and I think the Cavs do have the luxury of time. Like, yes, he has, again, made it public on several occasions now that he will not entertain a trade or a discussion of a trade, or like really what his future plans are with this team, until maybe this summer at the earliest, when we know if the Cavs make an offer. And like you said, the feel out process just still isn't quite as clean as maybe Cleveland would hoped it would be. But yeah, like they do have the luxury of time on their side. Like he does have 2 years left on his contract before like he ultimately has to make that decision, and whether or not he just doesn't pick up his option, the Cavs let him walk for nothing. And sure, that's likely the path that both sides go down if they don't reach an agreement and the Cavs decide not to trade him this summer. But again, they do have like the luxury of time on their side to kind of figure out like what are the next steps, what else can we do with like our limited assets. We don't enter that second luxury tax threshold, and it really hamstrings us in terms of just making moves and doing things financially. And then like what can we do just to ensure that, one, we can keep this guy that we invested quite a bit in and are willing to kind of drag out this relationship as long as possible to kind of figure this out. And I think we'll really, again, know when this heats up or opens up come this summer. And the Cavs, at least publicly, can say, like, we haven't had the opportunity to evaluate this team when healthy. And I think that is a valid, thing just to say, just on the grand scheme of it all. But also, just more importantly, you have to kind of figure out, like, what team you want to be when you get to that point. And maybe there's more wholesale questions outside of Donovan Mitchell, like maybe Jared Allen isn't the right fit because Evan Mobley's clearly a center. And you look to move Allen to find like a stretch of your four next to Mobley. And like that provides, again, more shooting next to Mitchell, which is always a good, smart thing. And you kind of keep making these, I don't want to say lateral moves, but like chess moves outside of Mitchell or Mobley or Garland, who I view as the three like perceived untouchables until at least Mitchell makes his future intentions clear. And if that's not with Cleveland, he does not become untouchable. But yeah, it's just smart optics. Like, I feel like you're just throwing the baby out before the bathwater at that point and making a rash impulse move if it feels like he's not going to, recommit. And I think the Cavs can kind of stick to their guns and Mitchell can stick to his. And it's just more of a who blinks first at this point.
I think you get to the summer and he is not signing the extension. He's effectively in a walk year at that point, because I think he's going to decline.
Why wouldn't he? Because he
can go get more guaranteed money for a longer amount of time.
Like,
right?
Why wouldn't he? Like, he'd be foolhardy not to do that.
It would be hard for me to be in a world where like that doesn't happen. But here's just the I guess the only thing I would say about this, to just maybe try to end this in a world where he does say, I think there still is a world where the market breaks in a certain way where he does sign an extension. I don't know how likely that is. I don't really know where this is going to end up. I think where the season goes is going to tell us a lot. But Donovan Mitchell, even if there are some concerns aside and all of that, and even if like the trade stuff maybe picks up again in the future, because it could. That's just the reality of this business. If he wants to sign the extension in the summer, you're going to offer him the most amount of money you can, and you do it, and you don't think about it, and you figure it out as you go a little bit. You keep a guy this good if you can. And if you have to go the other way, we can revisit like what this era has been. But I think there's no question, Evan, that to me, if you look at this year, and this is why I wanted to do this episode, Mitchell, where this team goes and what he wants and where he decides he wants to be at the end of the year is going to be the biggest story of the 2024 calendar year. What Mitchell wants, where he says does he sign or not, is going to shape the Cavs franchise beyond 2024. It's one of the more monumental decisions in recent memory, and we're getting close to some point of clarity. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. There's still a lot to happen. There's still a lot we don't know, but we're headed towards some point of clarity with him in within 2024. That clarity is inevitable.
It's not going to happen right away, and I know folks that are maybe more anxious about this than others. That doesn't give you the instant gratification that maybe you're hoping for, but that's just the nature of the beast. And again, like, it's going to be a little bit of like blinks first kind of thing, and also more importantly, like, who is able to wait this out longer. And I think both sides do have the luxury of time, and a decision doesn't need to be made right away. But like you said, like, an answer will come. It won't come in February unless, like, again, things just go completely sideways between now and February 8th. And like the Mitchell's just like, all right, I'm done here. I want to move on now. But yeah, we will have to revisit this in the summer, and also like do like a kind of a deep dive if he does move on, because it would be a very bitter pill to swallow. Like, I know Chris said he is top 10 to top 15. I said he's maybe top 15 to top 20, but like,
I said top 10 to top 20.
Sorry, my apologies.
Correct.
But I said top 15 to top 20. But like, you don't let those players go willy-nilly. Like, fight tooth and nail to try to keep them. I think we saw the Cavs kind of play the game a little bit with LeBron when they thought LeBron maybe would stay and they wouldn't trade the pick that became Colin Sexton. And they were trying to convince LeBron to stay, and maybe they would have done it if LeBron said yes. But maybe the Cavs have grown up a little bit from that, because that was Kobe Altman's first year running the Cavs, actually. So we'll see where this goes. But like, yeah, you don't let those guys walk without putting up a fight and just kind of throwing up your hands at the first instance of like outside noise or like even internal discomfort on the fact that he may be on his way out.
Let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens. We'll be back at you after Cavs Wizards. Have a great Wednesday. Talk to everyone soon.